And I want to thank the sponsors of this event this afternoon. Economic inequality and economic injustice have been a real popular topic in this country and worldwide for that matter in recent years. And it's very gratifying to see folks here at Cincinnati take such an interest in this issue. One of the things I learned early on was that you don't start a speech with statistics, but I'm going to violate that. I want to give you a couple of statistics that will sort of give us the backdrop to our conversation around economic inequality and education. I live in Chicago, and 18,000 students in the Chicago public school system are homeless. 90% of families who sent their kids to Chicago public schools earn $30,000 or less. A recent report showed that CEOs in the US now are earning 350 times more than the workers earn. And incomes in the United States, family incomes have been flat for the last 25 years. So I want those numbers to roll in your head as I speak, because it's I think it's an important context to locate the education discourse. On May 19, at the Cincinnati Public Schools, President Bolton, who will speak here today, said something that we don't hear often from school board leaders these days. She declared that she would protect Cincinnati Public Schools from the threat of privatization. I'm paraphrasing, but it was really gratifying to hear that. The fact is there are forces within the corporate school reform movement who have long sought to privatize public education. In order to create the necessary conditions for that, they've pursued elaborate strategies to demonize teachers and their unions. Their remedy for ailing schools is to expand charter schools, promote public school vouchers, enact so-called parent-trigger laws that let parents vote to hand over a school to private operators, to push high-stakes testing by which teachers are evaluated. They want to close down quote-unquote underperforming schools. We closed 50 schools in Chicago, as many of you already know. They want to weaken, if not outright eviscerate, labor unions. The narrative of bad teachers being the main culprit in declining academic performance in our schools has so shaped our political discourse that many good liberals and progressives, folks who have long fought against racism and economic justice, have embraced. That includes much of the liberal foundation establishment, Democratic Party leadership, notably President Obama and Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, and entertainers like John Legend. But there are exceptions. Actors Matt Damon and Cynthia Nixon have joined the teachers and unions in the fight to reclaim our public schools. And Donna Brazile has formed Democrats for Public Education as a counterweight to the corporate tendency within the Democratic Party. There is no evidence, to be sure, that corporate education reforms have produced higher test scores or better schools. The Center for Research on Education Outcomes at Stanford University found in a 2009 report that 17% of charter schools outperformed their public school equivalents, while 37% of charter schools performed worse than regular local schools, and the rest were just about the same. A 2010 study by Mathematica Policy Research found that on average, charter middle schools that held lotteries were neither more nor less successful than regular middle schools in improving student achievement, behavior, or school progress. Among the charter schools considered in the study, more had statistically significant negative effects on student achievement than statistically significant positive effects. These findings are echoed in a number of other studies. These experiments in education have gone on for decades. In fact, the first charter schools were established in 1992. A key reason they've not delivered on their promise is that many of the reform movement leaders are pursuing motives and agendas that have nothing to do with helping public school students in urban communities succeed. A cursory look at who these folks are is actually quite instructive. The Walton family, Walmart, the Walton Family Foundation, Bill Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Eli Broad, ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, that I'm certain Many of you here know who they are, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and so forth. It is not surprising that these corporate leaders would almost exclusively focus on teachers as the root of the problem, as opposed to poverty, and to poverty in all its manifestations. In fact, this exclusive focus on teachers as the root of the problem in our public schools has prevented overdue appreciation of the main driver of poor academic performance, namely poverty. It's quite a paradox that the economic policies that the Chamber of Commerce and the Walton Family Foundation, Walmart, and so forth pursue are implicated in the degradation of urban neighborhoods, which of course affects institutions in those communities, whether they're churches that provide services and public education that is funded through a tax structure, property tax formulas and so forth. That when the economy declines, those institutions suffer as well. The attack on unions and the push for a low-wage economic model has contributed to those conditions in those neighborhoods. We know that family income is the #1 predictor in a child's success in school. Now, when some of these corporate leaders hear that, they accuse us of making an excuse. You're just making an excuse for school failure. But in fact, facts are facts. Yes, I come from Africa. I know that poor kids can actually learn. What happens is that when you place those obstacles, when kids have nowhere to go after school, no after-school programs, when kids are homeless, there are the questions of who's reading to this child at night at the homeless shelter, and what kind of breakfast do they have before going to school the next day. So the fact of the matter is that they simply encounter more and more obstacles to academic success. And yet, poverty is the one thing that has been left out of our national conversation, our national debate on education. And why? Well, if you're Walmart, right, if you're the Chamber of Commerce, you have a vested interest in warding off poverty from the conversation, because you'd have to look in the mirror. The Chamber of Commerce historically has been associated with actually outsourcing jobs. You can go on their website and click on a link that actually is a business where they can help you to find a location in India or Bangladesh to establish your business. In this moment, they're fighting in Washington against a proposed $10 minimum wage. In Chicago, they fought us when we proposed a $10 living wage for Walmart workers and sort of big box store workers, 10,000 in Chicago who work for these stores, who are, by the way, parents and folks who oftentimes have to take 2-3 jobs to make ends meet. When they do so, they're not as involved in their kids as they want to be. Many parents tell us, I would like to attend parent-teacher meetings, but I'm on a second shift as a security guard downtown. I'd like to buy gadgets for my kids, tools to help my child do better in school, and they can't afford it. And yet, right now, we're in a real battle nationally. McDonald's workers are fighting sort of the fight for 15, to demand a $15 wage. Who's opposing that? Are the same folks who are lecturing to us about educational excellence and who are blaming teachers for school failure. And yet, many teachers will tell you that they are dealing with the consequences of this decline. Kids who are poorly nourished, kids who have all kinds of sort of issues, social distresses, and so forth. And it might sound hopelessly liberal, but it's important to appreciate that the most successful models, the most successful education models in the world, Finland in particular, actually embrace a very progressive vision of education, where there's universal preschool, there's universal health care, they have small class size. In Finland, class size is 15 students per class, and they add an extra teacher to boot. So you see sort of the focus, and very specialized training centers for teachers, universities that are designated to train and certify teachers. So we know. So this is actually what works. There's no mystery to what actually works in education. That is sort of the framework, really tackling. Here in Cincinnati, you have the community learning centers model, which at its core is an intervention at the resource level, where you are essentially acknowledging the role of these deprivations in academic outcomes and making sure that kids' lives are fulfilled in a holistic kind of way. So I'm going to stop there because I know we're going to have questions. But so I think from AFT's vantage point, one thing we haven't done a good job of is really explaining to people what the union actually does in the area of professional development and support for teachers. AFT spends literally millions of dollars. I didn't know this until I joined the union as a staff back in 2009. In Chicago, every month there is free professional development for teachers that is sponsored by the union. There is Share My Lessons, right, which is a worldwide internet, what did Juliet say?
It's an online site for free lessons.
Online site where I think the numbers now are 600 to 700,000 teachers nationally who log in to share best practices, to share frustrations, and to share lessons and so forth. And the union invests in this. So that really